Hello folks, I'm trying out one of these lavalier mics here. Hopefully that will improve the sound. Picked up the tip on a fairly inexpensive model, thought I'd try it out, and if it works really well then hopefully we'll get better videos from here on out with better sound. So today I wanted to treat a question that's often the first out of people's mouths when they contact me or come over to look at instruments, and they see I have an array of instruments. They also notice that I have a lot of instruments that look to be in great shape, often like new, that have been set up to play just perfectly, and they want to know my secret. They want to know where I get them from. And a lot of times you can see the mechanics of the question in their faces. They're thinking, well, if you can get them, I can get them, and cut out the middleman. So where do I get my instruments? Well, it's actually a complex question. And for about half the instruments that I do get, I do exactly the same as you do, or anybody else. I price watch on various websites with fluctuating prices, and when stuff gets ridiculously cheap, I buy. And then I do a full 1 to 2 hour setup on said instrument before I resell it. So it's not something that everybody can do. It's something that you can do if you learn how to do some basic guitar maintenance and setup. You don't have to be a fully qualified luthier from a luthier school. There's plenty of online tools to help you do basic setups and make guitars play better. So a lot of, I'd say half of what I do to find instruments is just like you do, combing around eBay for hours and hours and hours and hours. It takes a lot of time, or other various sites, finding guitars being sold for a good deal that may have a small issue or a small setup required, but that's only about 50%, or maybe even less. The rest of where I get my instruments from, it took 20 years to set up. I mean, I used to work for a couple of different guitar manufacturers. I got to know dealers. I got to know wholesalers. So from working in the industry, I picked up some tips and found out places to get stuff. Also, to be able to trade, or to be able to buy wholesale, you have to set yourself up a lot of times as a vendor or a wholesale yourself, which requires logistics. You set yourself up as a small business. You need a tax ID number in the United States, probably the same in England or Australia, wherever you're from. And then with certain vendors, you have to commit to buy so much at a time. I mean, there are certain places where you can get guitars cheap, but you got to buy 500 to 1,000 each order. You can't buy ones and twos, or you have to commit to so much volume per year or something, or you have to buy so many pieces. A lot of times when I negotiate wholesale deals with makers and manufacturers, and sometimes distributors, you're buying guitars in cartons of 4 or 6 or 10 to get the price break, and also to get a shipping deal. A lot of times it's the shipping that eats up your margin on anything you buy. It just kills it. You find a guitar for a great price. Let's say you get a guitar for $95, and you can set it up and sell it for $200 or $180, double your money, so to speak. And then you look into shipping, and it's $50 shipping or $45 shipping. That kind of kills that. So if you can negotiate, multiple piece shipping, Or even a lot of these vendors or distributors will say, if you buy this many, we'll do free shipping. Not all of them, but some of them do. And that takes time to build up those rapport you got. Of course, have capital to make those deals happen. And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times you have to have the adequate paperwork. You have to have a viable business that's got all the the qualifying signatures and stuff. So you're actually a business, a trading business, with a proper address, and you have a tax ID number. And in some cases, they require that you prove your tax status as well. They don't want people buying guitars from them that are not paying their taxes. So yeah, there are a number of things that you can't just do on a whim. You can't just go out and buy the same or have the access to the same guitars as someone like me. It takes time to set up. And then there are lots of smaller guitar manufacturers that you can actually set up wholesale deals with without all the paperwork. Some aren't so stringent. I'm not going to give away names, but there are two or three people that I've dealt with lately that I found incredibly lax. I didn't have to provide any proof or anything like that. It was once we agreed on a price, they just shipped me the guitars, and the volume was such that when I got them and set them up, I could price them at a reasonable working profit. Now, I should say that people like us, or myself, are not necessarily making a killing either. I mean, there are some times where you buy a guitar and you think you're going to make a certain margin, you don't. There's a lot of trial and error in this business. The market fluctuates a lot. There are a lot of things that the values crash quickly. There are certain brands of guitars that just have hardly any resale value. Even if they're good and well made, there's a perception out there that they're only worth so much. So there's a lot of pain involved in guitar or instrument speculating, buying and selling, and it's sometimes better just to pay someone an extra $20-30 for them to deal with the pain, and you get a nicely set up guitar. And I think most customers come to that understanding. I don't go into detail like this with people who ask. I just, when they ask the question, where do you get your guitars, I say, if you've got a whole day, I can tell you maybe a dozen of the places that I comb. It's a full-time job. Even though I do work other jobs, I spend hours and hours and hours seeking out instruments, and the proof is in the pudding. You see me putting out videos every other day of brands that you've never heard of, and a lot of you make those comments, and a lot of you seem grateful that you're getting this information on brands and models that perhaps you didn't know about. And then there are some things that you're following the trends. You're not a trendsetter. I just happened to hear about the Firefly guitars and what a great deal they were for $139 free shipping, so I picked one up. Luckily, the guitar in question was out of stock, so when I went to sell it, somebody was happy to pay me what I paid for it, plus a small fee for putting an hour or two's worth of setup into it, making it play absolutely beautifully. But there are times where you think you're going to make a certain margin on something, and you don't. You can't, and it's a little too close for comfort, or you're selling things at cost. Those of you who have your own shops, your own businesses, your own eBay businesses, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's, some people think that it's glamorous in a way, that you're able to get this stuff and sell it. Why can't I? Well, you can if you're willing to learn the trade, develop some expertise, develop an eye for assessing instruments, materials, joinery, craftsmanship, and also take the risk. I mean, when I buy 6, 10 ukuleles, sometimes even more, there's a certain risk involved, especially if you're dealing with companies from China. Let's say I get 25 ukuleles from somewhere in China, chances of doing any returns on anything that gets thrashed are slim to none. So it's a big risk involved. Some Chinese sellers or manufacturers or distributors will honor. They want your business, and they're just as upstanding as anybody else. But of course, there are dodgy ones out there too, and you learn who not to deal with relatively quickly. It's such a competitive world that I find most of the enclaves that I deal with, whether in the US or in another country, they want your business, they want your repeat business. So just about everyone treats me really well, particularly when they see that I'm liable to come back and grab another 6 or 10 if I like something, or even if it's just ones and twos. They need that business, and of course, when they find out that you're also producing reviews and helping awareness of a certain on a certain product, then of course they want your business even more. So yeah, I know this is a bit waffly, but it's a question I get all the time. Where do you get your guitars? The answer is hundreds of places. Not even one or two, three, four Chinese distributors. It's more than that. I've got various places that specialize in different instruments, i.e. I buy ukuleles from them, but I don't buy guitars, or vice versa. Or I buy a certain kind of ukulele that I think they make well, but they don't do well on another model. So and of course, to set up with those companies, it takes time to build trust and correspondence, and you need a lot of patience. I mean, there is a lot of times the language barrier, which I've always managed to work with. I find that most people who are trying to sell to the US or British public make good efforts to communicate. There are some exceptions here and there, but by and large, I've had good success. But working with the Chinese sellers or distributors is only a small part. There are lots of distributors and wholesalers in the US as well, or even in other countries. I've worked with people in France. Of course, there's people like Thomann in Germany. And that's a whole other realm. That these incredible online middlemen that have sprouted up, like Rondo, like Thomann, like Monoprice, even certain sellers on Amazon and eBay that seem to offer something singularly, like for instance, recently I showed you the Ivy or IYV guitars. There are little pockets that you find, and sometimes you need to be a bona fide small business or qualify yourself as a wholesaler, and other times you don't. You just need to be able to negotiate and buy a certain piece count or something like that. And then there's a lot of hunting and picking. I still buy quite a number of guitars that I fix up, restore, or just do good setups on from places like eBay. So I still buy used guitars, which are available to anyone. But of course, you have to be able to do the repair work or the setup. Otherwise, it's not a financially sound investment. I can buy, I bought all those Daisy Rock guitars because I could fix them, and I did. I bought a load of those sparkly ones, very, very, very cheap, a big box load of them, and I set them all up. I did about 1 to 2 hours on each piece. I think there were about 20, 25 of them, at one point in my garage, and they finally all sold, and they all sold at a reasonable profit. Even though I gave a couple away as charity, even with factoring that in, it was still a profitable enterprise. But it would have been a risk for somebody who can't do the work, or would have to hire someone to do the work. So there's I'm not trying to say I'm special and you can't do what I do. A lot of you do it, but the idea that you can find product, so I can find product and just buy direct won't work in all these scenarios. Of course, in some it will, because we can all buy from Amazon and eBay, and but in others, some of the things that I set up, some of the stuff I get hold of would be incredibly hard for someone just starting out. Some of these relationships have taken years. I used to not only work for guitar manufacturers, I also work for some big wholesale distributors that sell guitar parts and things like that. So I know that whole industry. There are 6 to 8 really big wholesale catalog companies in the US. Things like Shaw, Davin Hanser, St. Louis Music, and they all have proprietary lines of guitars as well. Saga, started out 2 or 3 different guitar lines. So did St. Louis Music, Harris Teller, places like that. And you kind of get to know those folks and the instruments that they're doing, and often they cycle in new manufacturers, or the lines that they're selling develop more and more models. I first came across brands like Recording King or Blue Ridge guitars, not through the main channels, but through these wholesale companies, and you could buy them about 30% off sticker price in the day. And I developed a number of relationships and got to know more and more of these types of enterprises, and have kept in touch or kept abreast of new developments along the way. It's a lot of work, but anyway, there's a long-winded answer to the question, where do you get your guitars from? And you wish you'd never asked, hadn't you? Okay, see you next time.